And we are live. Welcome to Olivia's Stories, ladies and gentlemen. You know I am sharing this story because I can't forget about it, and it keeps coming back. I love my husband so much, and I hold him in very high regards. But you know, sometimes having a male friend can sometimes bring some uncertainty and trust issues in a relationship. I am also not a saint. I have my fair share of flaws, and I have done my husband wrong. I mean, we should have sat down as adults and discussed everything and not act irrational like he did at first. I need advice, what I should do in this situation. How do I deal with this? And please give me tips for future purposes so I won't repeat the same mistake again. My husband, male 26, and I, female 25, met on social media, well, on Facebook to be specific. Well, he had sent me a friend request one day, and usually I do not accept friend requests from people I do not know. But that day, as I was scrolling through my phone, all bored and cooped up in the house, I found myself accepting his request. Well, not before I checked his account, and if he was a catfish or a real person, after I had confirmed that I accepted his request. Within any minutes, the guy sent me an inbox message on Facebook Messenger. So as we were chatting, he complimented my pictures and told me that he had seen my location, since I would usually put my location whenever I post my pictures, and my bio mentioned that I lived in Island Bridge and Parkgate Place apartments. He told me that he lived in Bellevue, which was about 18 minutes walk and 4 minutes drive away. We continued chatting. He was actually a very fun person. So as we were in the same town, he asked to meet up with me at least. A few days later, we met at Rai's Chinese takeaway restaurant that had recently opened around the corner. When we met, he was actually finer than in the pictures. Not to say he was ugly in the pictures or something. He was handsome, very handsome, but seeing him live. We were already friends. He was a good listener and a very good advisor to have. He was a very fun person to be around with. Our energies clicked, you know. We got along very well. But there was one thing that I had noticed about him was that he had a very short temper, and you had to be careful of what you say to him, even if it's a joke. And another thing, it was like he had some kind of trust issues. He was not a very trusting person. I once asked him about his trust issues and temper. He told me his story about his ex-girlfriend who had made him take responsibility of a child that was not his, and the story about his parents, that his mother was not faithful to his father, and a lot would happen in the house, which somehow led to violence in front of him. That was when he had developed trust issues and a very short temper. When he told me his story, I couldn't believe it, and I promised to be there for him no matter what, and that I would never betray him, at least not intentionally. A month later, he confessed his feelings for me. Well, I had also developed some feelings for him. He was what my soul needed, you know. The chemistry and the spark was there, so the relationship was formed. He would tell me that he loved me every single minute he got, and would make me promise that I would never betray him. From there, I knew that my baby needed help. Maybe some therapy would help him. So I tried talking to him about seeking help, but he bluntly refused and told me that he would never speak to a person he doesn't know about his problems. You know, men and their egos sometimes, so I just let him be. We worked so hard to fix the issues that he had, but eventually we conquered it all. I was grateful for the fact that he had allowed me to help him get through everything and somehow be able to forgive and move on. So after like a year later, we got married, and it was the best day of our lives. Since we both had no parents or any relatives of some sort, we celebrated our big day with friends and colleagues. Well, I grew up in a foster home, so I don't really know if my parents are still alive or not, and it always saddens me that I had grown up in a foster home without any trace or names of my parents. It's like they had never existed, you know. But life has to move on, right? And besides, we can't always worry ourselves about people who never bothered to look for us, who actually forgot that they had or have children. Anyway, enough about my somber and boring story. So after Frank and I got married, he was a changed man. He was ready to be a family man, you know. His tempers had gone down, and I was very much happy with the changes. Our house was full of happiness and love. Even our intimate moments were on another level. I was a happy woman. I lacked nothing. From love, happiness, handsome husband, beautiful home, and everything, but I don't really know what had come over me to destroy all of that good thing. So I had a male best friend that I had actually taken as my brother. Kristen and I were in a foster home together. By grace and his luck, He was adopted by some rich parents, but later reunited with his father. So life was fortunate for me, and that was how we lost each other. But later reunited when we were both in university, I was so happy to get a chance to be united with Kristen again. Since then, we became inseparable. Frank, my husband, had his own doubts about my friendship with Kristen, but I would always assure him that there was nothing more that was going on between us. It was just a purely brother and sister relationship. Not knowing that I was just fooling my mind and Frank's mind, Kristen actually had his own thoughts about our friendship relationship. And it didn't end very well because I betrayed one person who was able to accept me into his world and heart and make me his without feeling insecure about it. And what did I do to appreciate that? I acted like a loose witch. I hate myself sometimes for what I did. I regret it. After a year of being married to Frank, we started talking about having kids. Well, it was also my dream to have kids with Frank. But I first wanted to boost my modeling career, so I asked if we would wait a little because at that time I had entered for Miss Ireland competition. He had his career and life all figured out. And I also wanted that, He had already had a legacy, an inheritance, but I didn't. And when I told him my reason to that, he got angry, of which confused me because despite that, he wanted to start a family. And I wanted that too, but he didn't understand my reasons of wanting to wait maybe another year of starting a family. And I didn't understand why. I mean, what was the rush? It wasn't like I would be in the competition forever, That modeling competition news was not sitting well with him. I don't know if it was maybe because I was working with Kristen most of the time since he was a photographer, so he was the one who would usually take pictures of me. I tried reasoning with him that modeling was what I love, it had started as more of a hobby, and I started loving it to a point that I had even thought of pursuing a career in the industry. Yes, I was working as a receptionist in one of the law firms in Dublin, name withheld due to personal reasons, but it wasn't something I had dreams to be in. So Frank became distant and would sometimes not come back home. I didn't know if the reason why his behavior had changed towards me was because of me wanting to pursue my modeling career, or because he had his own things that he was not telling. But I had put that aside because I trusted my husband, and I knew that he wouldn't do me dirty or do something that would destroy and jeopardize what we were trying to build. He loved me too much to put our relationship in jeopardy. But instead, I was the one who had put our relationship and marriage in the state where it is now. I wonder what really came over me. One sunny weekend, Frank came back home in the afternoon. Mind you, he had been gone for 3 days without even bothering to call me. I asked where he was coming from. The answer I got was, "I am trying to pursue my career also, since you don't want us to start a family." That response shook me because I didn't expect it from him. He was slowly going back to being his old short-tempered self. I wondered what had driven him back to that state that we had worked so hard to conquer, but I just let it slide and hoped that he would tell me when he was ready. During that time when my husband was busy acting up, I started spending more time with Kristen. Well, Kristen was what I can call a great time passer. He helped me pass time when my husband was super distant from me and our marriage. I was going through a lot, I knew my husband loved me, but his behavior was stressing me out, to a point that I would even find myself venting in Kristen. I know it was wrong of me to just put my marital problems out there or share them with a friend or an outsider, but I needed someone to vent to, and Kristen was there and available. Time passed. I continued spending more time with Kristen, up until Frank saw that I was no longer staying at home for long. He figured that I was spending time with Kristen, so he asked why I was spending more time with Kristen. And the stupid Casey myself lied and told him that Kristen and I were preparing for the Miss Ireland competition, so that was why I had been with Kristen most of the time as my photographer, of course. I knew he didn't believe me, but there was no evidence that showed that there was something going on between Kristen and I. But I knew that there was actually something going on between Kristen and I. I just couldn't tell my insecure and short-tempered husband that during the time when he was an absent husband to me. I had found solace in Kristen because he was there to listen to my venting sessions, and he was what I can call a shoulder to cry on. So, as I was busy venting on Kristen, I didn't know that he had his own agenda. He actually pretended to be my brother, my best friend, and my shoulder to cry on. Weeks later, as my husband was busy pulling his stunts, Kristen and I kissed. I managed to break it at first and reminded him that I was a married woman and I shouldn't have done what I did. Instead of respecting my decisions, the guy just poured his heart to me, telling me how much he had thought him and I would actually end up together, married and having kids. His confession confused the shish tea out of me, because I had thought our relationship was of a brother and I, but he actually saw a life partner to me. I mean, he had all the time in the world to tell me that when I was single and available, so why would he confess when I was married and during the time when my marriage was going through a patch? After that, I couldn't face him for like a week. Then he came back. Well, he came to my house. He actually came to apologize and blamed his confession to the alcohol that we were drinking that day. As a person that I had thought was my best friend, my brother, I forgave him and gave him another chance to continue where we had left off. Not knowing that the vulture was actually back for me, I don't know how and what I can call it, but he actually destroyed my marriage. And another thing, Frank had told me several times to stay away from Kristen because he had started acting like an obsessed person, but I didn't listen. But instead I gave him the benefit of the doubt and thought that my husband was looking at things out of proportion. I thought he was exaggerating, you know. I knew that he didn't like my friendship relationship with Kristen from the day I introduced them to each other, and I used that to close Frank's judgments towards Kristen. So one day my husband and I had a very heated argument about the fact that I wanted to wait for a year to start a family or have kids. That day he lashed out on me to a point that he even told me that he had thought I was different from his ex-girlfriend, and he had thought I knew what I wanted when I first got into relationship with him and agreed to marry him. He even asked if I was cheating on him with Kristen since I was always with him. After that heated argument, he went out to only God knows where. I was so heartbroken by what he said. His words were stuck in my head to a point that I found myself calling Kristen and asked to spend the night with him, as friends of course, of which he agreed. I was in mixed emotions. I didn't know what to do with myself, you know. My other side was angry at Frank for comparing me with his ex, and his words were like a deep stab in my heart. I was also frustrated at the fact that he didn't understand my reasons for why I wanted to pursue my career first before having any children. So that night, as I went to Kristen's flat, he automatically knew what I had needed, and that was alcohol. We drank. I wanted to numb the pain I was feeling inside my heart and forget everything that Frank had said earlier on, so drinking like a fish was the only option I had. Kristen decided to offer me a weed joint that we smoked together, and it did make a trick because most of the things I did or said there I don't really remember. So we smoked and drank. I was having the best time of my life with my ex-male best friend. As we were having fun, I felt a sense of peace and belonging, and one thing led to another. I remember kissing Kristen. The music he was playing made me miss the intimate sessions I would have with my husband, which somehow changed from fire to ice. Ever since he wanted to start expanding the family and I didn't agree, his intimacy game dropped to the ground, and I was suffering. You know, the weed was in my head, the alcohol fully in my system, as we were kissing with Kristen. Things got heated to a point that clothes started flying and we couldn't hold ourselves, so we did the deed. The next morning came and regret came crashing over me. I realized what I had done and left Kristen's house like I was chased by dogs. I was scared that Frank would find out, and what I did somehow made me think that what he said when he compared me to his ex-girlfriend was somehow true, and it did eat me up. I didn't know what to do with myself. I wished to just go to the ocean or to the river Liffey so I can wash away the sin that I had committed. I realized that I had put my marriage in jeopardy, all because I couldn't give my husband what he wanted and ended up finding solace to drugs that led me to be unfaithful to my husband. Days later, Frank had been home, and he apologized for how had behaved and told me that he didn't mean to compare me to his ex. But he was under pressure because he really wanted to have children and build his own family since he doesn't have one. I understood his reasoning, but the guilt was there, you know. I mean, how you tell your husband that you have cheated. And I prayed that Kristen doesn't say anything or do anything stupid that would make Frank find out about my abomination and shame that I had done. Little did I know that the bastard had captured every moment of that night. So about a week later, I received mail, which was very odd because all communications are done technologically nowadays, so I took the mail, wanting to find out what it was. Maybe it would have been my parents finally reaching out, not knowing that it was a very big and destructive bomb. As I opened the mail, I found the letter written, "The night I would never forget, I hope we do it again soon." And it was from Kristen. I got the shock of my life as to why would Kristen do this to me. My heart was beating too fast, thoughts running through my head. I was asking myself, what if Frank was the one who got the mail and he saw the pictures and a letter that Kristen had sent? I sent Kristen a text right away and broke everything off with him. I wanted nothing to do with him because he had started acting like a psycho. As I was busy, lost in my thoughts, I heard the car door opening and I knew that it was Frank. So I took the mail along with everything that Kristen had put in the mail and threw it in a trash can. When Frank came in, he found me drinking wine like I was drinking water, and he knew that if I drank wine like that, I would either be under pressure or something was bothering me. And that time, I had forgotten that it was the day that Frank would take out trash. I was in so much stress. I told Frank that it was nothing to worry about, and I left him there in the kitchen and went to the bedroom. My mind came back later that it was the day that Frank had to take out the trash. I rushed to the kitchen and found out that the trash can was empty. I looked for Frank and found him in the sitting room, looking at the pictures that Kristen had sent, and the letter was beside him. I knew there and then that I was in deep shit. I knew that my marriage was over. Frank couldn't even look me in the eyes. He was furious, and I knew what was going to come next when he was like that. His eyes were full of rage, hatred, and hurt. I had hurt my husband and destroyed my marriage in the most humiliating way. I hated myself and still do hate myself for that. But I had to try and explain why I had done what I did and apologize, right? So the next day, when I had seen that he was no longer enraged like he was the previous night, I asked to speak to him. I was glad that as much as his tempers kept coming back, but he was not violent, well, at least towards me. So I explained everything to him from point A to point Z. I tried making him understand that I didn't do what I did on purpose, and it wasn't my intention to destroy what we had. Instead of listening to me, he went to our bedroom and took out all my clothes. I knew the words he wanted to say already, so I decided to not fight him, but apologize and give him some space, with the hope that he would calm down and let us fix things. I mean, we were both wrong. Yes, he didn't cheat on me, or at least I didn't know or had the evidence that he was really not cheating on me, but we were both wrong. And we had to come to terms with our mistakes and fix them like a married couple, you know? I love my husband a lot, and being away from him made me realize how naive and careless I was to do what I did to him. About 2 months later, Frank came to my apartment and asked that we could talk, so I agreed. Both of us confessed everything. Well, more like I confessed everything that I was doing with Kristen. He also confessed that he had been staying at his apartment because he wanted to be away from me. He confessed that his actions were selfish, but what he had discovered about me really broke him. We said a lot to each other, and he listened attentively. I think he understood the damage his mistrust had caused, the pain he had inflicted upon me. As I was torn between the love I felt and the betrayal I had endured, I decided to give Frank a chance. I mean, I was the one who made the big mistake here, so it was only fair to stay and fix our relationship. I recognized that his suspicions had stemmed from his own insecurities and fears, rather than any wrongdoing on my part. I agreed to work on rebuilding our relationship, but only if we both committed to healing and regaining the trust we had lost. With the help of a couples therapist, we embarked on a journey of self-reflection and open communication. We learned to address our insecurities, to listen to one another's fears, and to rebuild the foundation of trust that had crumbled. Our love began to heal, but scars remained. Frank is now acutely aware of the cost of suspicion and mistrust. He vowed to be more understanding and open in our relationship. While I am still carrying the pain of the accusations and betrayal I had done, I chose to forgive, recognizing that rebuilding trust would take time and effort from both of us. We learned that love requires vulnerability, honesty, and a willingness to confront one's own fears and insecurities. We sought a new beginning. My husband and I love each other so much, and I believe that we will heal and be able to move on from everything. I don't know how to be free again without making my husband suspect that I would be doing something to destroy our marriage again. Please help me with advice and tips. No judgments, please.